Caleb, Isaiah, where are you? Serena Coleman's voice trembled as she rushed into the mansion's kitchen, heart pounding at the sound of childish laughter echoing through the sterile halls. She shoved open the door and froze. Dylan Parker, the cold billionaire, his black suit rumpled, sprawled on the floor, playing horse for Caleb, whose red t-shirt gleamed with sweat as he rode Dylan's back. Isaiah, also in a red t-shirt, clapped wildly, giggling. "Faster, horsey!" Caleb shouted, waving a tattered astronomy book. Dylan's deep laugh filled the air, his eyes alight with a warmth Serena never imagined. Her light blue maid's uniform clung to her as she gripped a rag, stunned. Could this man who despised children truly change? What secret softened his heart? The truth would unravel everything. The faint glow of a cracked lamp flickered across Serena Coleman's cramped apartment in East Atlanta, casting shadows on walls stained with time. The air smelled of damp plaster and yesterday's coffee, and the hum of early traffic seeped through a window that never quite closed. Serena stood before a chipped mirror, her hands trembling as she pinned her sleek black hair into a tight bun. Her light blue maid's uniform hugged her frame, its crisp fabric a stark contrast to the chaos of her life. At 28, her beauty was undeniable. High cheekbones, deep brown eyes, but exhaustion carved lines beneath them. She glanced at a faded high school graduation photo on the wall, her younger self smiling, clutching a dream of teaching children about the stars. That dream felt like a distant galaxy now. On the sagging mattress behind her, Caleb and Isaiah, her 3-year-old twin sons, slept tangled in a single blanket, their red t-shirts rumpled. Their soft breasts were the only calm in Serena's storm. She was a single mother, abandoned 4 years ago by a man who swore he'd stay, left with 2 boys and a pile of bills. Rent was overdue, the fridge held only milk and half a loaf of bread, and her savings were a memory. Her phone buzzed on the counter, shattering the quiet. A message from her babysitter. "Mom's in the hospital. Can't watch the kids today. Sorry." Serena's stomach dropped. Her hands gripped the counter, knuckles paling. No babysitter meant no options, and no options meant risking everything. She worked at the Parker Mansion, a fortress of wealth owned by Dylan Parker, a 35-year-old white billionaire who ruled Atlanta's tech empire with an iron grip. Parker Tech, his company, was a name whispered in boardrooms and splashed across headlines. But among the staff, Dylan was known for something else, his contempt for anything that disrupted his perfect world. Children, he'd once said, were a burden, a drain on efficiency. He'd fired a groundskeeper for letting his daughter tag along, her laughter deemed an assault on his focus. Serena had heard the stories, how he'd snapped at a cook for a smudge on a glass, how his eyes could freeze a room. One mistake, and she'd be out, her boys left with nothing but hunger. Serena knelt beside Caleb and Isaiah, brushing their curls. Their faces, so alike, held the innocence she fought to protect. She'd promised them a better life, one where they could look up at the stars and dream, not just survive. But today, survival demanded a gamble. She couldn't miss work, not with the landlord's threats ringing in her ears. Her fingers lingered on an old astronomy book, its cover worn from years of hope. It was her talisman, a relic of the nights she'd studied constellations, dreaming of classrooms filled with eager faces. She tucked it into a frayed bag with crackers and juice, whispering, "You're coming with Mama today?" The twins stirred, blinking up at her. "Where are we going?" Caleb mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Isaiah echoed him, clutching his red t-shirt. Serena forced a smile, her chest tight. "To Mama's work, but you gotta be quiet, like little stars hiding in the sky, okay?" They nodded, too young to grasp the stakes. She dressed them quickly, their red t-shirts bright against the apartment's gloom, and packed their bag with care, as if love could shield them from the world's harsh edges. The bus ride to the Parker Mansion felt endless, the city's sprawl blurring past in grays and browns. Serena held the twins close, their small hands gripping hers, the astronomy book pressed against her side. The mansion loomed ahead, a sleek beast of glass and steel, its manicured lawns a world apart from her own. Its grandeur mocked her, a reminder of the chasm between her life and Dylan's. She slipped through the service entrance, heart pounding, and tucked the stroller into a storage room near the kitchen, a dim space smelling of bleach and cardboard. The twins settled on a blanket, their red t-shirts like beacons in the shadows. Serena handed them the astronomy book, open to a page of the moon. "Look at this, okay? Stay here, quiet as mice," she whispered, kissing their foreheads. She stepped into the mansion's polished halls where every surface gleamed with cold perfection. Her job was to keep it that way, wiping down glass walls, aligning papers on Dylan's desk, ensuring no trace of her existence lingered. Each task was a tightrope walk, one slip away from ruin. Dylan wasn't due back until evening, but his presence haunted the place, his rules etched into every corner. Serena moved with precision, her hands steady despite the fear gnawing at her. She dusted a crystal vase, its price likely more than her yearly rent, and checked the twins every 10 minutes. They were engrossed in the book, Caleb pointing at the moon, Isaiah giggling softly. Relief flickered in her chest, but it was fragile, a candle in a storm. Her mind wandered to the stars she'd once memorized, Orion, Cassiopeia, names she'd hoped to teach in a classroom. That dream had kept her alive through sleepless nights and empty cupboards. Now it was buried under the weight of diapers and overdue bills. She glanced at the storage room door, praying the twins would stay hidden. If Dylan found them, her world would collapse. Yet as she polished a mirror, catching her own tired reflection, a spark of defiance flared. She was more than a maid, more than the whispers of unreliable that followed black women like her in places like this. For Caleb and Isaiah, she'd risk it all, but risks have a way of unraveling. As Serena moved to the next room, her focus sharpened by fear, she didn't hear the soft patter of tiny feet. Caleb and Isaiah, drawn by a glint of light from an open door, slipped out, their curiosity pulling them toward the forbidden heart of the mansion, Dylan's private bedroom. The astronomy book lay forgotten, its moon glowing faintly on the page, as the twins stepped into a world where their laughter would soon shatter the silence. Serena Coleman moved through the Parker mansion like a ghost, her every step a silent prayer to remain unseen. The vast halls, all glass and steel, gleamed with a sterile perfection that seemed to mock her existence. Each polished surface reflected her shadow, a fleeting reminder of her place in this world of wealth, a place where she was invisible, yet indispensable. Her heart thudded with the weight of her secret. Caleb and Isaiah, her 3-year-old twins, were hidden in a storage room near the kitchen, their presence a ticking bomb that could detonate her fragile life. She clutched a microfiber cloth, her fingers trembling as she wiped down a glass wall, the cold surface biting her skin. Every swipe was a battle against fear, a fight to keep her boys fed, clothed, and safe. The mansion's silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of air conditioning and the occasional click of her shoes on the hardwood floor. Serena's mind churned with the memory of her astronomy book, left with the twins, its worn pages a lifeline to a dream she'd buried under years of struggle. She'd once imagined standing before a classroom, pointing to constellations, her voice sparking wonder in young eyes. Now her world was reduced to this, erasing smudges, aligning papers, and praying for invisibility. Dylan Parker's rules were ironclad: no mess, no noise, no children. His disdain for kids was legendary among the staff, whispered in hushed tones. A man who'd fired a gardener for a child's giggle, who saw chaos in innocence. Serena's chest tightened at the thought. If Dylan found her boys, her job, her lifeline, would vanish. She slipped back to the storage room, her breath catching as she eased the door open. Caleb and Isaiah sat on their blanket, their small hands smudging the astronomy book with crayon marks. Caleb's brow furrowed as he traced a star, his tongue poking out in concentration. Isaiah giggled, mimicking his brother, their faces alight with the kind of joy only children could find in a dim, bleach-scented corner. Serena knelt, her heart swelling and breaking at once. "You're doing great, my little stars," she whispered, brushing their curls. Their smiles were her anchor, but fear clawed at her. "Stay quiet, okay? Just a few more hours." They nodded, too young to sense the desperation in her voice, their innocence a knife twisting in her gut. Back in the main hall, Serena resumed her work, her movements mechanical yet precise. She polished a chrome railing, her reflection distorted in its shine, as if the mansion itself warped her existence. Each task was a tightrope walk, one misstep, one speck of dust, and she'd fall. She thought of her landlord's last warning, the sharp edge of his voice promising eviction. The fridge at home, nearly empty, haunted her. She couldn't fail Caleb and Isaiah, not when they were all she had. Her fingers tightened around the cloth, knuckles aching, as she moved to Dylan's office, a sanctuary of sleek monitors and minimalist decor. She aligned his pens, dusted his keyboard, every action a plea for survival. Dylan wasn't due back until evening, but his presence lingered, a specter of judgment in every corner. Her mind drifted to the stars again. Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, names she'd memorized in a life that now felt like fiction. She'd wanted to teach kids to look up, to see wonder in the night sky, not just hardship. That dream had kept her going through nights of hunger when she'd skip meals so the twins could eat. Now it was a faint pulse, barely alive under the weight of reality. She checked her watch, her pulse spiking. She'd been away from the storage room too long. Hurrying back, she found the twins still engrossed, Caleb pointing at the moon in the book, whispering, "Look, Isaiah, it's big." Serena's heart eased, but only slightly. "Good boys," she murmured, tucking a stray curl behind Isaiah's ear. "Keep drawing the sky for Mama." As she returned to the dining room, wiping down a glass table that could buy her a year's rent, the mansion's silence grew heavier, almost accusing. She imagined Dylan's cold eyes, the ones the staff whispered about, eyes that could fire you for a single flaw. Her hands shook as she polished, the cloth slipping slightly. She caught it, her breath hitching. She couldn't afford a mistake. Not today, not with her boys hidden just steps away. The astronomy book, with its moon and stars, was her only comfort, a reminder of who she could have been. She glanced at the storage room door, willing it to stay closed, willing her boys to stay safe. But children are not made for confinement. In the storage room, Caleb's eyes wandered from the book, catching a sliver of light from a distant hallway. "Isaiah, look," he whispered, pointing to a faint glow where a door stood ajar. Isaiah's face lit up, his curiosity a mirror of his brother's. The astronomy book slipped to the floor, its moon forgotten, as the twins crept toward the light, their small feet silent on the cold tiles. They didn't know they were heading toward Dylan's private bedroom, a forbidden realm of luxury and secrets. Serena, lost in her work, her cloth gliding over glass, didn't hear the soft patter of their steps. The mansion held its breath, waiting for the moment when innocence would collide with order, and everything Serena fought for would hang in the balance. The Parker mansion's silence was a blade, sharp and unforgiving, as Serena Coleman wiped down a glass table in the dining room, her heart a drumbeat of dread. Each swipe of her cloth was a plea to keep her secret safe. Caleb and Isaiah, her 3-year-old twins, hidden in a storage room, their presence a fragile thread holding her world together. She checked on them minutes ago, their small hands smudging her astronomy book with crayons, their giggles a fleeting comfort. But now her focus wavered, her mind tangled in the fear of discovery. The mansion's sterile halls, all gleaming glass and steel, seemed to watch her, waiting for a misstep. Serena's breath hitched as she polished, her reflection in the glass, a ghost of the woman who once dreamed of teaching stars to children. That dream was a faint pulse now, drowned by the terror of losing everything. In the storage room, Caleb and Isaiah had grown restless, their young eyes wandering from the astronomy book's worn pages. The moon they'd been tracing no longer held their attention. A sliver of light spilled through a crack in the hallway, glinting like a beacon. Caleb's face lit up, his curiosity a spark that needed no fuel. "Isaiah, look," he whispered, pointing to the glow where a door stood ajar. Isaiah, ever his brother's shadow, nodded, his grin wide. The book slipped to the floor, its moon forgotten as the twins crept out, their tiny feet silent on the cold tiles. They didn't know they were heading toward Dylan Parker's private bedroom, a fortress of luxury where no one dared tread. Their laughter, soft but bright, trailed behind them like a melody in a tomb. Serena, oblivious, moved to a chandelier, her cloth brushing its crystals with care. Each sparkle mocked her, a reminder of the wealth that could crush her life in an instant. Dylan Parker's reputation loomed over her, his cold eyes, his disdain for anything that disrupted his perfect order. She'd heard the stories. A maid fired for a crooked napkin, a driver dismissed for a child's stray toy. Children to Dylan were burdens, chaos incarnate, obstacles to his empire of control. Serena's hands trembled, the cloth slipping as she imagined his voice, sharp and final. "You're done." Her boys, Caleb and Isaiah, were her heart, but they were also her vulnerability. She glanced toward the storage room, her pulse spiking. Too long since her last check. She started toward it, her steps quickening, a knot tightening in her chest. Meanwhile, the twins reached the open door, their eyes wide at the sight of Dylan's bedroom. It was a world of opulence. A black leather bed framed by sleek steel, a minimalist chandelier casting soft light, a rosewood desk holding a single wooden box of collectible coins. A massive abstract painting dominated one wall, its colors swirling like a storm. Caleb, bold as ever, climbed onto the bed, bouncing with a squeal. Isaiah followed, giggling, his small hands tugging at a silk curtain, leaving smudges of crayon wax. Caleb spotted the wooden box, its lid ajar, and grabbed a silver coin, holding it up. "Moon coin," he declared, his voice ringing with delight. The coin gleamed, catching the light as Isaiah clapped, their laughter echoing through the room like a forbidden song. Serena reached the storage room, her heart stopping as she found it empty. The astronomy book lay abandoned, its pages open to a crescent moon, crayons scattered like fallen stars. "Caleb! Isaiah!" she whispered, panic clawing her throat. She spun around, searching the hallway, her breath shallow. The mansion's silence was no longer a comfort, it was a threat. She hurried toward the main wing, her shoes clicking too loudly, her mind racing with images of Dylan's wrath. If he found them, her job was gone. Her boys, her dreams, their future, all gone. She passed a mirror, catching her own wide-eyed fear, and pushed forward, following a faint giggle that sent ice through her veins. In the bedroom, the twins' play grew bolder. Caleb tossed the coin, watching it spin and land with a soft clink on the hardwood floor. Isaiah tugged harder at the curtain, a seam straining under his small grip. Their laughter swelled, a sound so foreign in this pristine space that it seemed to shake the walls. Dylan, meanwhile, stepped into the mansion's foyer, his polished loafers clicking sharply. He'd returned early from a conference, his mind still buzzing with deals and deadlines. The faint sound of laughter stopped him cold. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. Children? In his house? His sanctuary, his carefully curated world, was being violated. He strode toward the sound, each step heavier, his anger a rising tide. The bedroom door loomed ahead, the laughter louder now, a challenge to his control. Serena rounded a corner, her heart lurching as she realized the giggles came from Dylan's private wing. She ran, her breath ragged, images of eviction and hunger flashing through her mind. She couldn't lose this job, not when every dollar went to her boy's survival. The astronomy book, her only link to a life beyond this, felt like a cruel joke now. She reached the hallway, seeing the bedroom door ajar, light spilling out. Caleb's voice, "Moon coin," pierced her, and she froze, terror rooting her to the spot. Dylan was steps away, his hand reaching for the door, his face a mask of fury. Serena's world teetered on the edge, her boy's laughter a beautiful, dangerous spark about to ignite everything she'd fought to protect. Dylan Parker's hand gripped the bedroom door's handle, his knuckles white, his heart a furnace of fury. The laughter of children, shrill, uninvited, sliced through the sanctity of his private world, a place where no one, not even his closest allies, dared tread. The Parker mansion's sterile silence, his carefully crafted refuge, had been shattered by the audacity of two small intruders. His jaw clenched, his eyes cold as the steel walls around him, Dylan prepared to storm in, to unleash a wrath that had felled lesser souls. Those boys, whoever they belonged to, were a violation, a chaos he'd sworn to banish. Yet as his fingers tightened, Ready to fling the door wide, a memory struck like lightning, freezing him in place. His breath caught, and the world tilted. Inside the bedroom, Caleb and Isaiah, oblivious to the storm brewing outside, continued their gleeful rebellion. Caleb, in his red t-shirt, held the silver coin aloft, its gleam catching the chandelier's light. "Moon coin," he crowed, tossing it to Isaiah, whose matching red t-shirt glowed as he caught it, giggling. The silk curtains sagged under Isaiah's earlier tug, a smudge of crayon wax stark against its cream folds. Their laughter bounced off the rosewood desk, the black leather bed, the abstract painting that cost more than most homes. The room, Dylan's fortress of order, was now a playground, its perfection defiled by tiny hands and fearless joy. Caleb bounced on the bed, his curls wild, while Isaiah spun the coin on the floor, its soft clink a defiant note in the mansion's silence. Serena Coleman stood at the hallway's edge, her light blue maid's uniform clinging to her frame, her sleek black hair still neatly pinned despite the chaos in her chest. Her heart pounded, each beat a scream of terror as Caleb's voice, "Moon coin!" echoed from the open door. She'd run from the dining room, her shoes slipping on the polished floor, driven by the sickening realization that her twins had wandered into the one place forbidden above all. Dylan Parker's bedroom. Her world teetered on ruin. If Dylan found them, her job was gone, her boy's future reduced to an empty fridge and eviction notices. She clutched the wall, her nails digging into paint, her breath shallow. She wanted to rush in, to snatch them away, but her legs felt leaden, pinned by the dread of Dylan's cold gaze. Dylan's hand trembled on the handle, his anger warring with a sudden, unbidden pain. The laughter, so bright and reckless, dragged him back to a memory he'd buried deep. His sister Emily, 5 years old, her frail frame wrapped in a hospital blanket, had once tugged his sleeve, her voice weak but stubborn. "Dylan, draw me a moon," she'd begged, her eyes bright with a hope he couldn't match. He'd been 16, consumed by school and ambition, and snapped, "You're such a burden, Em." Those words, sharp and careless, were his last to her before her heart gave out. The guilt had carved a hollow in him, one he'd filled with control, with wealth, with a life that left no room for chaos or children. Now Caleb's voice, calling the coin a moon, echoed Emily's, and Dylan's rage faltered, replaced by a grief that stole his breath. Inside, Caleb tossed the coin again, its arc a silver flash. Isaiah clapped, his giggle a melody that seemed to taunt the room's austerity. Serena forced herself forward, her pulse a deafening roar. She reached the doorway, her eyes wide as she saw her boys, her heart, her everything, playing in the lion's den. The astronomy book she'd left them, its pages of stars and moons, was a distant memory now, useless against the disaster unfolding. She opened her mouth to call them, but the words died as she saw Dylan, his tall frame rigid, his hand still on the handle. His face was a storm, but his eyes flickered with something she couldn't name. Anger, yes, but also a shadow of pain. She stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Mr. Parker, please. I'm so sorry," she stammered, her hands trembling. "They didn't mean it. I'll fix everything. Please don't fire me." Dylan's gaze shifted to her, his eyes piercing, but the fury she expected didn't come. He looked past her, through the door at Caleb and Isaiah. Caleb, unaware, spun the coin again, its clink like a heartbeat. Isaiah tugged the curtain, laughing as it swayed. Dylan's jaw tightened, but the memory of Emily, her small hand, her plea for a moon, held him back. He saw her in the twins' joy, in their fearless defiance of his perfect world. His hand slipped from the handle, his voice caught in his throat. Serena braced herself, her heart a fragile thing ready to shatter. She waited for the words that would end her life here. "You're done." But Dylan's eyes softened, just a fraction, and he spoke, his voice low, almost strained. "Get them out," he said, "and keep them quiet." Serena nodded, tears pricking her eyes as she rushed into the room, scooping Caleb and Isaiah into her arms. Their laughter faded, their small bodies warm against hers. She whispered apologies, her voice cracking, as she carried them back to the storage room, her mind reeling. Dylan watched her go, his hand still hovering where the handle had been. The coin lay on the floor, gleaming like a forgotten moon, and for the first time in years, he felt the weight of his own emptiness. Serena, clutching her boys, felt a flicker of hope amid her fear. Why hadn't he fired her? What had stopped him? The answer, buried in Dylan's silence, was a mystery that would unravel them both. Serena Coleman's heart still raced as she led Caleb and Isaiah back to the storage room, their small hands warm in hers. The echo of Dylan Parker's voice, "Get them out. Keep them quiet," lingered like a storm cloud. But his restraint baffled her. Why hadn't he fired her? The Parker mansion's sterile halls, all glass and steel, seemed to close in as she moved, her light blue maid's uniform clinging to her sweat-dampened skin. She clutched her twins, their red t-shirts bright against the dimness, as if they were the only color in this cold world. Her mind churned with fear and a flicker of hope, a dangerous spark she barely dared to trust. Dylan's eyes, softened for a fleeting moment, had unsettled her, stirring questions she couldn't answer. Was he toying with her, or was something deeper at play? She settled Caleb and Isaiah on their blanket in the storage room, the bleach-scented air heavy around them. The astronomy book lay where they'd left it, open to a page of stars, its edges worn from love. Serena knelt, her voice a whisper. "No more running, okay? Stay here for Mama." Caleb nodded, his curls bouncing, while Isaiah clutched the book, his eyes wide. Their innocence pierced her, a reminder of why she endured this tightrope life. She kissed their foreheads, her lips trembling, and returned to work, her steps heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The mansion's silence pressed against her, a reminder of Dylan's rules. No chaos, no children, no mistakes. Yet he'd let her stay. Her fingers shook as she polished a chrome fixture, each swipe a prayer to hold on to this fragile mercy. In the kitchen, Serena tackled a counter, its steel surface reflecting her strained face. She worked with mechanical precision, but her thoughts spiraled. Her dream of teaching astronomy, of showing children the wonder of constellations, felt like a cruel echo in this place. The memory of Dylan's softened gaze clashed with his reputation. A man who saw kids as burdens, who'd fired a worker for a child's stray laugh. She glanced at the storage room door, her heart a knot. Caleb and Isaiah were her stars, her reason to fight, but also her vulnerability. If Dylan changed his mind, her world would collapse. She wiped harder, as if she could scrub away the fear, the doubt, the longing for a life beyond this. Unbeknownst to her, the twins grew restless again. Caleb, ever the leader, flipped through the astronomy book, his finger tracing a moon. "Isaiah, let's play horsey," he whispered, eyes glinting with mischief. Isaiah giggled, nodding, and they tiptoed out, drawn to the kitchen's open space, its tiles gleaming under soft light. Their laughter, soft at first, grew louder, a melody that defied the mansion's rules. Caleb dropped to his knees, mimicking a horse, while Isaiah waved the book like a flag. The sound carried, a spark in the stillness, and reached Dylan, who'd lingered in the mansion, his mind still tangled in the memory of his sister Emily. Dylan stood in his office, staring at the coin left on his desk, its silver surface catching the light. The moon coin, Caleb had called it, haunted him, stirring the ghost of Emily's voice, her plea to draw a moon. He'd pushed her away, called her a burden, and lost her forever. The guilt was a weight he'd carried for years, buried under wealth and control. The twins' laughter, now drifting from the kitchen, tugged at that wound, both painful and strangely alive. He followed the sound, his polished shoes clicking, his heart a mix of irritation and something softer, something he didn't want to name. Serena, wiping the counter, froze as the laughter hit her ears. Her breath caught, panic flooding her veins. "Caleb! Isaiah!" she gasped, dropping her rag and rushing toward the sound. She pushed open the kitchen door and stopped dead, her light blue uniform swaying as she stood, stunned. Dylan Parker, his black suit rumpled, was on all fours, Caleb riding his back in his red t-shirt, giggling wildly. Isaiah, also in a red t-shirt, sat cross-legged, clapping, the astronomy book open beside him. "Faster, horsey!" Caleb shouted, waving the book. Dylan laughed, a deep, unguarded sound, his eyes bright with a warmth that Serena had never seen. Her hand gripped the doorframe, her mind reeling. This was the man who despised children, who'd nearly fired her hours ago. What was happening? Dylan glanced up, catching her gaze, and his laugh faltered into a sheepish smile. They caught me off guard, he said, his voice tinged with embarrassment. Said I'd make a good horse. Serena's throat tightened, words failing her. She wanted to apologize, to beg for her job, but the sight of her boys, so joyful, so fearless, on the back of this billionaire stopped her. Caleb slid off, running to her, his arms wide. Mama, he's fun, he said, his voice a dagger of joy and fear. Serena knelt, hugging him, her eyes locked on Dylan. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. They won't do it again. Dylan rose, brushing his suit, his expression unreadable but softer than before. They're fine, he said, his voice low, almost gentle. Just keep them close. He turned, walking away, but his steps were slower, as if the twins' laughter had tethered him to something he couldn't shake. Serena held her boys, her heart a storm of relief and confusion. The astronomy book lay open, its moon glowing faintly, a symbol of the dream she clung to. Dylan's leniency, his laugh, his warmth, it didn't make sense. What had changed him? The answer lay in a past she didn't know, a crack in his icy facade that her boys had unwittingly widened, pulling them all toward an uncertain future. Serena Coleman's heart still trembled from the sight of Dylan Parker on his knees, laughing with her twins, a warmth in his eyes she'd never thought possible. The memory clung to her as she moved through the Parker mansion's gleaming halls, her cloth gliding over a glass railing with practiced care. But the spark of hope Dylan's leniency had ignited was fragile, flickering in the shadow of her reality. She was a single mother, a black woman in a world that judged her every move, and the mansion's sterile silence felt like a jury waiting to condemn. Caleb and Isaiah, her 3-year-old stars, were safe for now, tucked back in the storage room with their astronomy book. Yet the weight of their presence, a secret that could unravel her life, pressed against her chest, making each breath a struggle. She slipped into the storage room, her pulse quickening as she knelt beside her boys. Caleb traced a star in the book, his small brow furrowed with focus, while Isaiah hummed softly, mimicking his brother. Their innocence was a balm, but also a blade. Every giggle risked exposure, every moment a gamble with their future. Serena's fingers brushed their curls, her voice a shaky whisper. You're my brave boys, she said, forcing a smile. Stay here, quiet, okay? Caleb nodded, holding up the book. For you, Mama, he said, pointing to a crescent moon. Her throat tightened, the dream of teaching children about the stars a distant ache. She kissed them, her lips lingering, then returned to work, her heart split between love and fear. The mansion's cold perfection mocked her as she dusted a marble console, its surface reflecting her strained face. Dylan's unexpected kindness in the kitchen, playing horse with her boys, haunted her, a puzzle she couldn't solve. The man who'd called children burdens, who'd fired staff for lesser sins, had laughed, his eyes bright with something human. But hope was dangerous, and Serena couldn't afford to trust it. Her life was a tightrope, stretched thin by bills, hunger, and the landlord's threats. She needed this job, needed the mansion's unforgiving order to keep her boys fed. Yet the whispers of her co-workers, sharp and sidelong, cut deeper each day. They'd seen Dylan linger near her, his gaze softer, and their murmurs grew venomous. Marcus, a wiry maintenance worker with a grudge, was the loudest. His eyes followed Serena, narrowed with resentment. He'd been passed over for a promotion, and her presence, her quiet competence, her twins' brief appearance, fueled his bitterness. In the break room, his voice carried, low but pointed. She lets her kids run wild, breaking rules, he muttered to a cluster of maids. Bet they're why things are going missing. Serena overheard, her stomach twisting. She kept her head down, polishing a silver tray, but the words burned. As a black woman, she knew the weight of suspicion, how it clung to her like a second skin. The other maids avoided her gaze, their silence louder than words, isolating her in a room full of people. The air shifted when a small painting, a rare abstract piece from Dylan's office, disappeared. The news spread like wildfire, whispers turning to accusations. Marcus leaned against a wall, smirking. Funny how it vanished after her kids were in the private wing, he said, loud enough for Serena to hear. Her heart sank, her hands trembling as she scrubbed a countertop. She hadn't taken anything, and Caleb and Isaiah were too young to steal. But truth was a weak defense against prejudice. The other staff, once neutral, now cast glances her way, their eyes cold. Serena felt the walls closing in, the mansion no longer just a workplace but a trap, its glass surfaces reflecting her fear. At home, the weight grew heavier. Serena's neighbor, Tanya, called, her voice dripping with scorn. Working for that white billionaire, huh? Think you're better than us now? Tanya's words were a knife, cutting into Serena's already fragile spirit. She sat on her sagging couch, Caleb and Isaiah asleep beside her, their astronomy book open to a starfield. The accusations at work, the judgment from her own community. They crushed her, making her feel like an outsider everywhere. She clutched the book, its pages a reminder of a dream she'd nearly forgotten, a dream of teaching children to look up, to see wonder. But wonder felt impossible now, buried under suspicion and fear. Karen, the head housekeeper, summoned Serena to a cramped office, her face stern. "There's talk, Serena," she said, her voice clipped. "The painting's gone, and people are pointing fingers. Take a week off until we sort this out." Serena's breath caught, her eyes stinging. "I didn't take it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My boys didn't either." Karen's gaze softened, but only slightly. "I know you're trying, but it's best for now." Serena nodded, her heart a stone. She returned to the storage room, gathering Caleb and Isaiah, their small hands clutching hers. She left a note on the kitchen counter. "I didn't take anything. Thank you for the chance." The words were neat, but her soul bled into them. As she walked out, pushing the stroller through the mansion service exit, Serena felt the world shrink to a pinpoint. Caleb and Isaiah, unaware, babbled about stars, their voices a faint light in her darkness. She held them close, her tears hidden, the astronomy book tucked under her arm. The accusations, the isolation, the weight of being a black woman in a place that didn't trust her, it was too much. Yet somewhere in the echo of Dylan's laugh, in the memory of his softened eyes, a question lingered. Why had he spared her? What had changed him? The answer was a shadow just out of reach, but it stirred a flicker of hope she couldn't quite extinguish. Serena Coleman pushed the stroller through the service exit of the Parker mansion, her heart a shattered thing, each step heavier than the last. The note she'd left on the kitchen counter, "I didn't take anything. Thank you for the chance," felt like a surrender, a final plea to a world that had turned its back on her. The Atlanta evening draped the city in gray, its humid air pressing against her skin as she walked toward the bus stop. Caleb and Isaiah nestled close. Their small hands clutched hers, their chatter about stars a faint light in her darkness. Serena's eyes stung, but she kept her tears hidden, her face a mask of strength for her boys. The accusations, the whispers, the weight of being a black woman in a place that judged her without proof. They had crushed her spirit. Back in her cramped apartment, the walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the scent of damp plaster and despair. Serena sat on the sagging couch, Caleb and Isaiah curled beside her, their breathing soft as they slept. The astronomy book lay open on her lap, its page of a crescent moon mocking her dreams. She'd wanted to teach children to look up, to see wonder in the night sky, but now she saw only eviction notices and empty cupboards. The rumors at the mansion, Marcus's venomous claim that her boys had stolen a painting, had stripped her of dignity. Tanya's words, her neighbor's scorn about thinking she's better for working for a white billionaire, echoed like a curse. Serena's fingers traced the book's edges, her heart aching for a life where she was more than a scapegoat. At the mansion, Dylan Parker stood in the kitchen, the silence deafening without the twins' laughter. Serena's note lay on the counter, its neat handwriting a quiet cry that pierced him. He read it again, each word tightening the knot in his chest. He'd let her walk away, let the whispers of his staff, his world, drive her out. The memory of Caleb and Isaiah, Their joyful chaos in his bedroom, their moon coin game, stirred the ghost of his sister Emily. Her voice, pleading for a moon he never drew, haunted him. He'd called her a burden and lost her. Now Serena's pain, her boy's innocence, mirrored that loss, and the guilt was a weight he couldn't bear. He'd spared her once, but had he done enough? Dylan's jaw tightened as he summoned Karen, the head housekeeper, his voice sharp. "Find out what happened to the painting. Now!" Karen nodded, her face pale, and within hours the truth emerged. Security footage revealed Marcus, the maintenance worker, slipping the small abstract painting into a storage closet, his movements furtive, his intent clear: to frame Serena. He'd resented her quiet competence, her fleeting favor in Dylan's eyes, and saw her as an easy target. Dylan's anger flared, not at Serena, but at the betrayal under his roof. "Marcus is gone," he told Karen, his tone cold as steel. "He doesn't set foot here again." Karen hesitated, then nodded, sensing a shift in the man who'd once ruled with unyielding control. Dylan didn't wait for dawn. He grabbed his keys, the note still in his hand, and drove to East Atlanta, the city's lights blurring past. Serena's apartment building loomed, its cracked facade a stark contrast to his mansion's polish. He climbed the creaking stairs, his heart pounding, not with anger but with a need to right a wrong. He knocked, and when Serena opened the door, her eyes were red, her face etched with exhaustion. Isaiah lay in her arms, feverish, his small body restless. Caleb sat on the floor, clutching the astronomy book, his eyes bright with trust. Dylan's throat tightened. The sight of them, so vulnerable, so like Emily, cutting deep. "I didn't take it," Serena said before he could speak, her voice raw but firm. "My boys didn't either." Dylan held up the note, his fingers trembling. "I know," he said, his voice low, heavy with guilt. "It was Marcus. He hid the painting to frame you. He's gone." Serena's eyes widened, a mix of relief and disbelief flickering across her face. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why believe me now?" Dylan swallowed, his gaze dropping to Caleb, who held up the book, pointing to a star. "Because I was wrong," he said. "About you. About them." He stepped inside, uninvited but unresisting, and pulled a bottle of children's fever medicine from his pocket. "For Isaiah," he said, handing it to Serena. She hesitated, then took it, her fingers brushing his. Dylan knelt beside Caleb, who grinned, offering the book. "Want to see the moon?" the boy asked. Dylan nodded, his voice catching as he traced a crescent with a crayon, his hand unsteady. Serena watched, her heart torn between hurt and hope. She'd told Dylan once, in a fleeting moment, about her dream to teach astronomy, to show kids the stars. Now his presence, his quiet care, felt like a crack in the wall she'd built against the world. "I should have stopped it," Dylan said, his eyes on the book, not meeting hers. "The rumors, the doubt." Serena rocked Isaiah, her voice soft but sharp. "Being black in your world, Mr. Parker, means always being doubted." Dylan flinched, the truth of her words a weight he couldn't dodge. He stayed, helping Caleb color, his suit jacket forgotten on the couch. Serena's tears fell silently as she gave Isaiah the medicine, her heart stirring with something new. A fragile trust, a question unanswered. Why was he here? What drove this man, once so cold, to kneel in her crumbling apartment, coloring stars with her son? The astronomy book, its pages worn with hope, held the only light in the room, a beacon for a future neither could yet see. Serena Coleman stood in the shade of a sprawling oak, her heart a fragile vessel brimming with a hope she hadn't dared feel in years. The backyard of the Parker mansion, once a sterile expanse of manicured lawn, now pulsed with life, a riot of color and laughter. Caleb and Isaiah, her 3-year-old twins, darted across a new playground, their giggles rising like a melody over the creak of swings and the soft thud of feet on sand. Serena's eyes traced the mural she'd painted on a low wall, a crescent moon cradled by a field of stars, its glow vivid against the afternoon light. The astronomy book, its worn pages a testament to her buried dream of teaching children about the cosmos, lay open on a wooden bench nearby, a symbol of a life she was beginning to reclaim. 3 months had passed since Dylan Parker's unexpected visit to her crumbling apartment, his apology and quiet care a crack in the wall of her despair. That night, as he'd colored a moon with Caleb, Serena had glimpsed something in him. A man not just of wealth, but of wounds, seeking redemption. She'd carried that moment like a secret, unsure if it would hold. But Dylan hadn't stopped there. He'd returned to her apartment again and again, bringing books, toys, a moon-shaped lamp that now glowed in Isaiah's corner. Each visit chipped away at her defenses, his presence steady, his words few but heavy with intent. When he'd asked her to design a playground for the children of his staff, Serena's breath had caught, her dream stirring from its long sleep. Now she watched Caleb chase Isaiah across the playground, their small figures weaving through slides in a sandbox dotted with star-shaped molds. The mural, her creation, was more than paint. It was a piece of her soul, a testament to the nights she'd studied constellations, dreaming of classrooms filled with wonder. Dylan had insisted on a storytelling corner, a shaded nook with a chalkboard and a shelf of astronomy books, where Serena now gathered the children of other staff. She knelt before them, her voice soft but alive, pointing to the mural. "See that moon?" she said, her eyes bright. "It's always there, even when we can't see it, guiding us home." The children, wide-eyed, leaned closer, their faces lit with curiosity, and Serena felt her heart swell, the teacher she'd always been rising from the ashes. Dylan stood at the edge of the playground, his usual crisp suit replaced by a simple jacket, his hands in his pockets. His eyes followed Caleb and Isaiah, their laughter a sound that had once grated against his need for order, but now felt like breath itself. The memory of his sister Emily, her plea for a moon he'd never drawn, no longer cut so sharply. Instead, it guided him, a quiet compass in a life he'd rebuilt from control to connection. He'd hated children, called them burdens, built walls to keep them out. But Serena's twins, with their fearless joy, had breached those walls, and her strength, her refusal to break under suspicion, had shown him a courage he'd lacked. He glanced at her, her face alight as she taught, and felt a warmth he hadn't known since Emily's days. Serena caught his gaze, her smile hesitant but real. She'd spent weeks designing the playground, pouring her dream into every detail. The moon mural, the star molds, the chalkboard where she now wrote Orion for the children. Dylan had listened to her ideas, not as a boss but as a partner, his suggestions quiet but thoughtful. He'd added the storytelling corner, insisting it be hers to lead. "You're a teacher," he'd said one evening, his voice firm. "This is your place." Those words had undone her, a validation she'd never expected from a man like him. The accusations, Marcus's lies, the staff's whispers, Tanya's scorn, had nearly broken her. But here, in this playground, she was more than a maid. She was Serena, the woman who'd always wanted to show children the stars. The other staff gathered, their faces softened by the laughter around them. No cameras, no headlines, just a quiet celebration of a space that felt like home. Caleb ran to Serena, tugging her hand. "Mama, tell us about Star," he said, his voice bright. Isaiah echoed, "Stars!" and the other children cheered. Serena laughed, a sound that felt foreign after years of fear, and began a story about the Big Dipper, her voice carrying over the playground. Dylan watched, his chest tight with something he couldn't name. He'd built an empire, but this, a place of joy, of connection, was worth more than any deal he'd closed. As the sun dipped, casting a golden glow over the mural, Dylan approached Serena, his steps slow. "You've changed this place," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "You've changed me." Serena's breath caught, her eyes searching his. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire, but a man who'd lost and was finding his way back. "You gave me a chance," she said softly, her voice thick. "Not just to work, but to be me." Their eyes held, a silent understanding passing between them, forged by her boy's laughter and a shared longing for something more. In the kitchen that night, as the playground's echoes faded, Dylan poured tea for them both, the steam curling like a promise. Serena sat across from him, the astronomy book on the counter, its moon a quiet witness. She reached out, her hand brushing his, a gesture small but heavy with trust. No words were needed. The mansion, once a fortress of cold perfection, was now alive, its heart beating with the laughter of children and the courage of a woman who'd never stopped dreaming. Serena's stars had found their place, and Dylan, for the first time, felt he belonged to something greater than himself. The laughter of Caleb and Isaiah fades into the Atlanta sunset, leaving behind a mansion transformed by love and courage. Serena and Dylan's journey, from suspicion to trust, from isolation to connection, reminds us that even the hardest hearts can soften under the light of innocence. What did their story stir in you? Did Serena's dream, the twins' joy, or Dylan's redemption touch your heart? Share your thoughts. We'd love to hear how this tale moved you. Thank you for joining us in this emotional ride, for letting these characters live in your imagination. Until the next story, when we'll meet again under new stars, keep looking up, dreaming, and believing in change.